I've always been a big fan of channel strips. I love the functionality, I love the versatility, but I've never really done a deep dive into any of my favorite channel strips and make comparisons. And that's what I want to do here. I want to take a look at what I would call kind of the big three, like the big three console manufacturers, widespread knowledge of these kind of consoles, and dig into the functionality and dig into, more importantly, the difference in sound. Each of these console plugins has a lot of versatility in them, and I really want to just take a look at them, see what they're like. So I've got them on some drums. I'm going to run through as many features as I can think of, as many as I can fit in, and let's compare them. Here we go. So the ones that I've actually chosen are all from Plugin Alliance, actually. So the Lindell 80 channel, this is the Neve. Never know if it's Lindell or Lindell. I'm going to go for Lindell because it sounds better. Lindell 80 channel. And it's a great Neve style console channel. What more do you want to say? It's quite aggressive, as Neves tend to be. Loads and loads of versatility in there. You can change the type of EQ. You can change a load of stuff down here on the compressor. Big mention, which I'm going to show you in a moment, is the smash mode on the compressor. Chef's kiss. The API channel is the Lindell 50 channel, which is perhaps even more versatile because you've got a load of different types of EQ on there, and you've got a couple of different compressors as well, which we will explore. And then the one that I probably use the most is like my utility kind of channel strip, is the SSL 4KE. Now on this one, you can actually change a few different things on the EQ. You can go from the brown to the black. You can change shelves and things like that. And you can change it so that you've got a different type of compression and expansion, like the dynamic section. Let's take a listen to them all. Let's take a listen to the kind of original ones for a minute. So I've got them on 3 different channels. You see down here, Neve, API, SSL. If I just go on the Neve one, but just bypass it, you'll hear the original drums and get a kind of feel for how they sound. It's just a drum bounce, just an overall mix. Sounds like some drums. I didn't want it to be too fast because I really wanted to kind of get into the release constants on here, because I find that they're most kind of apparent when you have something a little bit slower, a bit more room to breathe. So I'm going to jump into the settings in a moment, but let's just hear the Neve versus API versus SSL. All the settings are the same. You can see what they are, but we will dig into them in a moment and just see how they sound. So Neve's coming up first. Here it is. Okay, so a lot of differences there for a start. Least of all, the kind of level. Now, I've had to attenuate the SSL fairly considerably because it was much louder. I'm going to have to do that to the API as well, because this one is just not quite cutting through as much. I found that kind of interesting, but it's just down to the way they're set up. You know, I'm not going to get too much into that whole thing right now, but just be aware there are kind of level differences, which I'm going to try and iron out as much as possible. But the thing is, a lot of these kind of level differences, apart from the actual physical level difference, is kind of down to the way it's compressing and the way that it's boosting. So what I've done is I've taken all the thresholds down to -20. So -20 on there, -20 on there, and -20 on there, which interestingly is the lowest any of them go. Then they're all at 4:1 ratio. That's at 4:1. You can see there, this one's at 4:1, and this one is indeed at 4:1. And then I've gone for the fastest recovery that they offer. So this is not necessarily exactly the same, but this is part of kind of the beauty of the channel strips. So recovery down at 100 milliseconds, I assume there. Release down at 50 milliseconds there. That'll make sense, wouldn't it? 100 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, yeah. And then the release down at 100 there. So this one is a bit faster, kind of twice as fast, but that's all we can really do. I wanted to really go, I could have put this one to 100 admittedly, but I wanted to see what the fastest kind of settings they have on offer are. And then on the EQ, I've just gone for 5 dB at 10k on all of them. So 10k 5 dB, 10k 5 dB. and 10k at 5 dB. And then the same thing down at 110 hertz, because the Neve can only do 110, it can't do 100. You might be able to with the modifier key, but I haven't. I've not messed around with any of the analog kind of THD stuff at the moment. Just going to take a listen to them all and kind of discuss the differences. I feel like it goes left to right in order of most aggressive, still fairly aggressive, the smoothest. But let me know in the comments what you think and which one you kind of prefer. So let's take one more listen and just kind of assess them. So start off on Neve. Yeah, so the Neve has definitely got that kind of presence and that mid-range kind of area. The EQs on the Neves are fairly broad, and they're fairly kind of, just because you're boosting at 10k, you're actually boosting far lower than 10k as well. That is true for the rest of them, but it's even more so on the Neve. The reason that the Neve kind of sounds quite aggressive is because if you boost 5 dB at 10k, you're boosting so much below that as well. Like, it's not just a brick wall and 10k is going up. It's far below that. It goes down to maybe like 4k, 5k. So when you're applying the same boost on these as you are to the API and the SSL, you're actually applying the boost to far more frequencies in the range, if that makes sense. You're applying it to far lower frequencies. So the thing that kind of appears to me is that this SSL is smooth. This is really aggressive. The API, to my knowledge, now I've used a Neve desk before, I've used an SSL desk before. I've never used an API desk. I've never actually used an API mic pre either. I don't think I've ever used a piece of API hardware. But they're always said to be really punchy. But I don't feel it's quite as punchy as the Neve, which is interesting to me. I'm not saying it's not punchy, like the preamps could well be. And I'm not really kind of pushing this at all because I don't want to get into that kind of clipping territory. But just straight off the bat, the Neve is very, very colourful. The SSL is a lot smoother and the API sits somewhere in the middle. So I just want to focus on the Neve for a moment, because this has some interesting features, mainly on the compressor, that I find incredibly useful. So the API is actually the only one that has an attack control on the compressor. On some SSLs, you have like a fast attack or slow attack button. On this one, you don't, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm kind of missing it. So we can do that on the API, but I've just put that up to kind of where it felt right. But we've got a fast button on the Neve, and then we've got smash. So I'm just going to go to the Neve for a minute. Just listen to this smash. It's amazing. So I'm going to leave the smash off to start off with and then bring it in. And as a kind of parallel channel, this is the stuff. This is the absolute, this is the source. So take a listen, then I'm going to bring that smash on. Like, that is crazy, isn't it? That is unbelievable. I don't know if I'd ever use that as just an all-out compression, not at these settings anyway, but you've got the dry mix as well, so we can just blend that in. Let's bring that down to 0 and then just bring that up. That is awesome. You've also got a high pass filter on the side chain, which I'm not using in this instance, but you've got it there if you want it. If we go to a fully wet version, so a really compressed version, then bring up that side chain, then it's going to affect like the kick drum even less. So you can hear when that side chain is all the way up, it's really letting the kick kind of come through because it's not listening to it in the detector circuit. The thing that appeals to me about this compressor is that it is so vibey, so characterful. Like, there's nothing clean about this compressor whatsoever. The thing that I should mention here is that all of these channel strips have a gate. So you've got a gate on the API here, gate on the Neve, and a gate on the SSL. Full disclosure, I never use gates. That's not true. I occasionally use gates, but I don't like them. I don't find that they are natural sounding enough. I don't find that they're really that great. I do really like the Slate Digital, whatever the gate was they bought out most recently, because you can get really in depth in that. The one in Virtual Mix Rack, the one for drums specifically, is the best of a bad bunch, in my personal opinion. Not a big gate user. That's not to say you won't. Maybe you will. So I'm not actually shooting out the gates on these because I don't feel like I'm that qualified to do it because I don't really use them that much. Either way. So on the Neve compressor as well, you have this, which I have no idea how to pronounce. It sounds French, but Neve from Burnley, so I don't know. Niveau. It sounds like it's kind of like a new version of something or an old version of something. Don't know, but it does change the sound. If I take it off, take smash up as well, and then bring it in, you can hear a little bit of a difference. It just kind of makes it less grabby, I feel. So without that on, it's far more smashy, but with that on, it's just a little bit more natural, not kind of grabbing stuff as much. I don't know what that is. I can't remember. I didn't do my homework, so kill me. But yeah, it is what it is. It kind of lets stuff through a little bit more. And then you've got a fast version as well, which is really quite handy because it does just clamp down on stuff. Have a listen. Yeah, it just chops off transients, just makes things way faster, which is cool if that's what you're after. So the 84 EQ is what we're on at the moment, and you can also take that off. So that just kind of allows more features with it on, and it kind of goes to an older style EQ. It's more reminiscent. It's not the 1073, but these kind of knobs kind of look like the 1073, don't they? So it's just a different style of EQ, which is going to sound kind of different. Have a listen. The main difference being that the filters are, the top end is the one that's actually changing because we're actually using it, but the filters are kind of not there. So this is an outer module and an inner module as well. So you've got high pass and low pass on there. If you take that off, then you've just got a high pass. But this Neve is overall, absolutely love it. It's so characterful, and it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for someone who wants something really smooth. It doesn't do that whatsoever. What it does is aggressive. It does vibey, character, really smashy stuff if you want it to, but never really shy, but always full of character, as you'd expect from a Neve. So that is kind of the ways that I use a Neve. There's different settings that you can put on each of them. I've gone over kind of the main ones that I feel are sort of important. You can drive these as much as you want, which, if that's something you're after, I feel they're kind of grimy and analog-y enough as it is. So I don't tend to drive them too much. The API though, this is where things get really interesting, because you can go through 3 different types of EQ. So we've got the 50B at the moment. You've got the 50A, which has fewer features. It's not got that 4th band in there. And then you've got the graphic, I believe, on the 60. So for me, I just use the one that loads up because I know it sounds great and I don't want to give myself fewer options. On the 50A, you don't have as many options. You don't have that extra mid-band, and sometimes you need that. I don't feel like the 50A and the 50B sound all that different. Let's just take a listen. So start off on the 50A and then go to the 50B. To me, they're kind of the same. But when you go to the 60, you can get into a bit more detail, and you have different frequencies as well. So you don't actually have that 10K that you had here. You've got just like a 16 and what is it, an 8 and a 4. So it's all done in octaves. So if you start off from the top, 16 to 8 to 4 to 2 to 1, half it, half it, half it, half it again. I guess this is what they would call musical EQ, which is a phrase I do kind of despise. But moving in octaves, I guess, is kind of a musical way of doing it. This one does sound different because the kind of filter shapes that you're using in the 50A and the 50B are just preset. But if you wanted to change the shapes of these, then you kind of can do that, because you want to bring that down, but then you can make it so the bell is slightly reduced in certain areas by affecting the bands either side of it. You know, it is moving towards that more kind of sweepable cue, and you can affect stuff in that way. So it is nice. It's not really directly comparable to the 50A or 50B, because the frequencies are different and the overall kind of EQ topology is different as well. Far more bands and in a completely different way. So not massively comparable, but different flavors, different ways of doing things. If we just have a listen to it and kind of try and shape that a bit. You can just get far more into it. You can just manipulate far more. Personally, I don't use this one because for me, it's weird. When I think of graphics, I think of the old Behringer graphics that we used to use for live sound, like the 31 band ones. And the way they were was just awful, because if you had one of the faders that got knocked off, like they're all in series, so one of those breaking would basically short the whole thing and just destroy absolutely everything. So I'm kind of put off graphic EQs in general, but you can kind of dig into stuff, which is great. And just above the EQ there, you've got a post. So this is EQ post dynamics or EQ pre-dynamics. So when it's highlighted, it means the EQ is after the dynamics. It doesn't actually represent that in the kind of visual, but it is. So for example, if we were to boost a load of low end and then make sure that the EQ was pre-dynamics, then you'd see that this is going to get loads more compression because the bottom end is shoving way more into it. And then as I illuminate this, it's going to compress on the low end a little bit less. Yeah, so a great way of kind of seeing what's going on is just to do that. If you want to check which one is before or after, shove a load of bottom end up into it and have a look at your gain reduction. But there are two different types of compressors here, the VCA and the FET. And the FET is super cool, but it's not that you have less control, you just have different control. So you've got a mix and a high pass filter, you've got input and output. So these are kind of, think of it in like the 1176 way where you have a fixed threshold. It's the same kind of thing here. But you've got different modes. You've got a limiter mode or a compression mode, or off if you want. A DS mode, which I think is exactly what it says, DSing. And then your release, you can either go for super slow, so 2 seconds, or pretty fast, or if you take them both out, then you've got 0.1. So indenting them in different combinations give you different ones. In my opinion, having a release time of like 2 seconds is no use to man nor beast. It doesn't do it for me, but 2.5 seconds, you know, whatever. I like to have it nice and fast. But let's just play around with this one and kind of see what it does. So you can really hear this when we have the release on the fastest setting. That snare, the kind of return back to normal is like a, it's really great. But then when we have it on its fastest, slower setting, 2.5 seconds, the snare just kind of dies. You don't get that sustain. Two very, very different types of compressor there. So you've got the FET and the VCA. The VCA you would perhaps think is you've got more control over it because it's kind of a different way of going about things, and you have more control over the attack, the release specifically. But in the FET you still have that control, just in a kind of different way, and they're kind of like presets. Modes, you've either got 20:1 or 2:1, which is fine. I mean, it's compression or it's limiting. That is its own beast. And then the ceiling, you're kind of changing essentially the amount. But it's cool. It's a really vibey compressor, and I don't know what else there is to say about it really. It's great in its own way. It does its own thing. We've got a few different features here. So feedback on an API or feed forward, it's to do with the way the detector kind of works, and one is going to be more smashy than the other, and it's just the way that it kind of loops back into itself. All APIs, I'm saying that now, all APIs, no, a number of APIs have this. The 2500 has this, and just take a listen to feedback or not feedback, feed forward. Now, I'm assuming that the soft is like soft knee, and then when it's illuminated, or not illuminated, it makes it hard knee, but it's not the clearest thing in the world. They're kind of just ways that the compressor functions. They're not really descriptive, ways of actually saying this does this. It's just about the way that the detector is working, perhaps, or how the internals of the compressor is actually working. And what I'd say with those, in the same way as on the Neve with the Nevo, whatever it is, and the Smash, if it sounds good, then press it. What you're really concerned with is the overall sound of these. And small features like that are either going to work or they're not going to work. Stick it on the one that works best for you, and that's the right way to go. So the SSL is the one that I'm most used to. And I have to say, I never take it off this. So you can have the brown one. I find that to be far too broad and far too kind of woofy. I don't ever click that because I just don't. It's just not something I go to. But let's see what we've got, because it's not as, you can't manipulate this in as many ways, I don't feel. You can kind of change the order of stuff and make the EQ pre-dynamics and post-dynamics. I should add, by the way, if you have to have this illuminated for it to be pre, but I was kind of just putting these all on default settings, as it were. And I actually don't feel like at these settings, unless you're going really extreme, as we were before, it's not making all that much difference. It will make a difference at more drastic settings, but overall, not doing too much. So let's just mess around, see what we can do, and see what the kind of flavors are that we can get from this. Now, with the SSL, when you bypass it and then bring it back in, there's a definite difference. And what I'm telling it to do is add some lows, add some highs, and compress a bit. That's exactly what it's doing. But in the other two, in the Neve and the API, there was such a night and day difference between bypassing and then bringing back in. If we take a listen to the Neve again, and I'll just take it out completely and then bring it in. Especially on that snare, like it's smashy as anything. And then on the API, I'll take everything out and then just bring it back in. I feel like the difference between not on and on is far less in the SSL. And the reason I mentioned that is because at the beginning I said this was kind of a gentlest. Well, it is, but the range that you've got on these is the range, and the amount you can manipulate it is kind of far more useful than these two. This one, the Neve, has the Neve sound. It has one sound, and that is a fantastic sound, but it's aggressive, it's smashy, it's vibey, it's analogy. The API has an API sound. It's not as pronounced as the Neve, in my opinion. The SSL is smoother, but on the mid bands, you can go really broad, similar to a Neve, or you can go really narrow. Narrower, it's not the most narrow thing in the world, not as narrow as, you know, the kind of built-in EQs that you might get on your door, but you can really manipulate things, and you can get, so you're digging in quite deeply. Let's just try and dig in a little bit more and see what we can get. You know, when you're actually bringing up these values and making stuff really broad and really aggressively kind of cranking stuff, you get that punch. And it's the crystal analogy thing, isn't it, that he says that on the snare or the kick or whatever, it's either kind of a 0 or it's at 15. And I think with SSLs, it's very, because it is quite smooth, it's also quite forgiving. If you go 15 dB on an SSL, it probably sounds pretty punchy and pretty great. If you do 15 dB on a Neve, God, do you know about it? It really smashes your ears. So although these two are very versatile in the features that they have and the different EQ types and the different compressor types, EQ types, this one, although the changes are relatively minimal, you kind of change the overall EQ and compression, but generally they're not that different, like not two worlds apart. The versatility you have in this SSL is when you start using these two bands as well, and you can really start to shape stuff. And the more you push stuff with the SSL, the punchier it gets. And to me, that is the real draw of this console. Those three plugins, to me, like, they're just the broad span of channel strips. There's nothing that I really can't get with any of these channel strips, and they just sound fantastic. So please let me know what your favorite channel strip is. There's probably some that I've missed there, and in the Plugin Alliance set alone, gosh, there's so many. There's the Focusrite, there's the AMEC, there's all the Lindell stuff on its own. There's just so many that I couldn't go through them here because, well, firstly, I don't use them all because I can't use every plugin on my system. You pick your favorites and you go with it. But these three really represent the best of every world and best of all different types of consoles. You've got the really aggressive Neve, you've got the kind of midpoint aggressive, but quite, you can manipulate it quite a lot, the API, and then the SSL, which is smooth when you allow it to be smooth, but when you really dig in, it can get so punchy and it can really be aggressive and really be vibey. So let me know which is your favorite down the bottom, and maybe I'll do another video where I'll take a look at some different channel strips. Either way, till then, see you again soon. Take care.